In the blinding glare of the operating room lights, I gripped the scalpel, my heart racing uncontrollably, unaware it would soon shatter my own dreams. Adrenaline surged within me, a mix of pride and vague dread. The cold metal felt reassuring in my hand, yet it also carried an ominous warning. Every step down the hospital hallway now felt threatening, the whispers behind my back sliced like sharp blades. I held a secret capable of bringing everything crashing down, but at what cost? Would I find the courage to face the darkness lurking ahead? Or would I be consumed by the very place I once believed to be my destiny? The day I held the scalpel for the first time, I never imagined it would someday cut my own dreams into pieces. Standing beneath the bright, almost blinding lights of the operating room at Jefferson University Hospital, I felt a surge of adrenaline pulse through me, mingling pride with a raw, undeniable fear. My fingers trembled slightly as I gripped the scalpel, the cool metal pressing against my gloved hand like a silent reassurance and a quiet threat. I was Daniel Hart, 32 years old, nearing the completion of my surgical residency, a milestone built on sleepless nights, relentless dedication, and sacrifices invisible to the world outside these sterile walls. I still vividly remember my first real glimpse of medicine's transformative power. I was only 18, shadowing at a local hospital in Philadelphia. When I witnessed an emergency surgery unfold, the surgeon had moved with unwavering confidence, calmly navigating chaos, each precise movement turning desperation into hope. Watching the relief and gratitude on the faces of that patient's family afterward, I knew immediately I wanted to feel that same sense of purpose one day. That memory had carried me through every grueling exam, every exhausting rotation, every moment I questioned if I was strong enough to endure. But ambition had a strange way of narrowing one's vision. Even from those earliest days at Jefferson, I'd noticed subtle signs, small tensions lingering behind forced smiles, whispered conversations abruptly silenced as I approached. A quiet, competitive ruthlessness seeped through the hallways, masked beneath impeccable professionalism. Yet, blinded by youthful optimism and self-belief, I chose to ignore those warnings, dismissing them as mere paranoia in an environment defined by excellence and stress. Then came Dr. Andrew Caldwell. Andrew wasn't merely respected. He commanded awe, tall and austere. His presence alone seemed to elevate the expectations of everyone around him. I remember our first real conversation vividly. He had fixed his sharp gaze on me, eyes probing, assessing, as he said softly yet deliberately, "Daniel, surgery isn't just about skill. It's about controlling yourself, controlling outcomes, controlling perception." I had interpreted his words as guidance, wisdom offered freely by a mentor invested in my success. Only much later would their true meaning become clear, chillingly clear. But back then, standing in that pristine operating room, Andrew's approval felt like my ultimate validation. I was chosen, I was trusted, and that mattered above all else. Looking back, it's astonishing and painfully ironic how clearly we can see in hindsight what we were blind to in the moment. The very trust that built my confidence would become the weapon to dismantle my entire life. From the very first moment I met Andrew Caldwell, I understood exactly why everyone around me both admired and feared him. Andrew was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with a casual, effortless authority that made people automatically step aside whenever he entered the room. His neatly combed, silver-streaked hair framed a face marked by piercing eyes that seemed capable of cutting through anyone's carefully constructed facade, instantly laying bare their deepest thoughts. I vividly recall the first time Andrew personally praised me. It was after a particularly challenging surgery, one that Andrew had allowed me to lead under his meticulous supervision. As I placed the final sutures, my hands trembled slightly, beads of sweat trailing down my temples. Andrew stood silently beside me, watching every precise movement. When the procedure concluded, he placed a reassuring hand briefly on my shoulder and said in a quiet yet unmistakably firm voice, "Well done, Daniel. You have the instincts of a natural-born surgeon, and that's something rare." It was only a brief comment, but the weight of his approval and the trust evident in his eyes left an indelible mark on me. At that moment, every sacrifice, every sleepless night I'd endured felt completely validated. This rare expression of recognition led me, perhaps naively, to place immense faith in Andrew not merely as a skilled mentor, but as someone who genuinely cared about my future. Yet, as I continued working closely with Andrew, I began to see glimpses of a more complex side to his personality. One afternoon, after an intense departmental meeting, I accidentally overheard Andrew speaking privately to Brian, another surgical resident. Andrew's tone had changed dramatically, becoming low, cold, and cutting like the blade of a scalpel. "You really think you're good enough to ignore my guidance? Trust me, continue this path, and no one here will be able to save your career." Brian's face turned pale, his eyes briefly flickering with fear. He lowered his head silently, unwilling or perhaps unable to respond. Moments later, Andrew emerged from that tense conversation, completely calm and composed, his expression revealing nothing of what had just transpired. Another unsettling moment came when I accidentally observed Andrew leveraging his influence to change the surgical schedule of another promising young resident who had begun earning significant praise from senior management. Standing quietly outside Andrew's office, I heard muffled yet clearly heated arguments inside, but when the door opened moments later, Andrew stepped out with his trademark composed smile, as though nothing unusual had taken place behind that door. These fleeting moments planted subtle doubts in my mind. Occasionally, I wondered if perhaps I was blind to some deeper truth about Andrew. But inevitably, the memory of his proud gaze and rare words of praise returned, washing away my momentary uncertainties. I chose to believe wholeheartedly in the idealized image of Andrew that I'd constructed, ignoring those small, nagging signs, warnings that, in hindsight, I should have never dismissed so easily. The hospital corridors always buzzed with whispered secrets, subtle rivalries hidden beneath smiles and firm handshakes. Gradually, I began noticing more clearly the ruthlessness of that quiet competition, something I'd initially dismissed as harmless ambition. One evening, after finishing a long shift, I passed by the conference room and saw Andrew speaking privately with Emma Reynolds, one of the most talented residents in our program. Emma had always stood out for her intelligence and efficiency. She was quickly becoming a favorite among senior surgeons. Yet, through the glass panel, I glimpsed her expression tense and troubled as Andrew leaned in, calmly yet firmly saying something I couldn't hear. When she stepped out moments later, Emma's face was drained of color, her hands trembling slightly as she hurried away, avoiding my gaze. A week later, Emma was suddenly transferred to another department, inexplicably removed from all high-profile surgeries. When I cautiously asked Andrew about her sudden departure, he shrugged indifferently, his eyes distant and cold. Emma wasn't quite ready for the pressure. "Daniel, not everyone can handle it." His response lingered uncomfortably in my mind, planting a seed of unease. I struggled internally, instinctively trying to justify his actions, convincing myself that Andrew knew what was best. But deep down, an unsettling doubt persisted, quietly gnawing at my trust. Still, I quickly pushed those thoughts aside, reassuring myself firmly that Andrew would never treat me that way. Our bond was different, built on mutual respect and genuine trust, or so I desperately wanted to believe. The morning of the liver transplant surgery arrived quietly, like the calm before a devastating storm. My eyes opened hours before the alarm, staring restlessly at the dimly lit ceiling as my pulse quickened with anxiety. Today wasn't just another operation, it was a defining moment, a trial of my skill and endurance, and everyone at Jefferson University Hospital knew it. I forced myself out of bed, poured coffee that remained untouched, and carefully reviewed every detail of the patient's file. Again, lab values, imaging studies, surgical notes. Despite having memorized them long before, the silence of my apartment felt oppressive, intensifying the relentless ticking of the clock as the minutes dragged by. Arriving at the hospital earlier than usual, I stepped through the familiar sterile halls, instantly aware of the unusual scrutiny from colleagues as they nodded at me in passing, their gazes lingering slightly too long. Near the locker room, my friend and fellow resident, James, caught up with me, clapping me gently on the shoulder with a tense smile. "You got this, Daniel," he said softly, his voice laced with a subtle edge. "The whole department's watching. You know, don't let them down." His encouragement felt heavy rather than comforting. Another reminder of the immense expectation placed upon me. I nodded briefly, managing a weak smile before stepping away, trying to shake the feeling of mounting dread that twisted in my gut. When I finally reached the operating room, Andrew was already there, poised near the imaging monitors, meticulously examining the patient's latest scans. As he noticed my arrival, he gave a subtle nod acknowledgement rather than encouragement. His gaze today was more penetrating, analytical, searching for cracks in my confidence even before I'd had a chance to prove myself. "You're early," Andrew remarked quietly, his voice calm yet charged. He paused to adjust the positioning of several surgical instruments on the tray, subtly emphasizing his precise control of every detail. "Couldn't sleep much," I admitted softly, attempting casual honesty. He glanced up briefly, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Good. It means you understand the gravity of what we're doing here. You'll be fine as long as you remember exactly what I taught you." The subtext wasn't lost on me. Follow my instructions precisely, or risk catastrophic failure. Technicians and nurses moved quietly and efficiently around us, double-checking instruments and equipment. I caught Andrew exchanging quiet, whispered instructions with a senior nurse, a brief, almost secretive interaction that left me oddly unsettled. When he turned back to me, his expression betrayed nothing. "Remember, Daniel, precision and decisiveness define the great surgeons." Andrew reminded me firmly, "Hesitation is the enemy. You hesitate, you lose control." I nodded again, throat tightening at his words. My hands, hidden beneath the edge of the sterile table, clenched into fists involuntarily, fingers pressed painfully tight until the skin turned pale. I drew a deep breath, attempting to steady my nerves as the reality of the moment pressed heavily upon my chest. Minutes later, the patient was wheeled in, a man barely 40, his face pale beneath the harsh surgical lights. His family waited anxiously somewhere beyond these sterile walls, placing blind trust in my skill, believing confidently that I'd bring their loved one back safely. The sheer responsibility of their trust felt crushing. As I prepared to make the first incision, my vision momentarily blurred, adrenaline flooding my veins. I glanced around once more at the faces around me, every pair of eyes fixated on my movements, silent expectation radiating from behind masked expressions. Andrew stood close, yet oddly distant, his posture poised, his presence dominating the room without effort. "All right," Andrew said decisively, shattering the heavy silence. "Daniel, you're in charge. Take the lead. Everyone here trusts you don't disappoint us." His voice held no room for doubt, no space for error. My stomach twisted sharply, and I felt a bead of sweat forming at my temple, hidden beneath my surgical cap. I stared down at the scalpel gleaming coldly beneath the bright overhead lights, my hand hesitating only a fraction of a second before I forced it steady. The room seemed to hold its breath along with me, waiting. In that moment, every whispered conversation, every subtle warning I'd ignored about Andrew's carefully hidden ruthlessness suddenly surged to the forefront of my mind, causing a brief flash of fear and doubt. But it was too late now. I had no choice but to trust myself. Pushing aside the lingering uncertainty, I tightened my grip on the scalpel, silently repeating to myself, "You can do this. You're ready." Leaning forward resolutely, I placed the blade against the patient's skin, making the crucial first incision, unaware that in this very moment my life was quietly beginning its irrevocable unraveling. As the scalpel glided carefully across the patient's abdomen, my initial confidence steadied my hands. At first, everything proceeded as planned. The surgical room remained silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the quiet hum of machines. Andrew observed carefully, standing close enough to intervene, but his posture deceptively casual, his face unreadable behind his surgical mask. "All right, Daniel," Andrew said calmly. "Let's move to the portal vein dissection now, slightly lateral from where we initially planned, about 2 centimeters to the right." I hesitated slightly, glancing at him in confusion. This adjustment wasn't part of the careful planning we'd gone through the night before. I paused, uncertain, my scalpel hovering in midair. "Are you sure?" I murmured softly, trying to hide my sudden doubt from the nurses and technicians around us. "We discussed a direct approach yesterday, didn't we?" His eyes, cool and unyielding, met mine. "Conditions have slightly changed. Trust me on this." "Daniel, 2 centimeters lateral. Proceed." An uneasy silence filled the room. I swallowed hard, my heart quickening. Andrew's calm authority left no room for further debate. Trusting his judgment had become second nature. After all, he was the expert, my mentor, and he surely knew something I didn't. Okay, I replied, taking a steadying breath as I adjusted the blade's direction, carefully moving 2 centimeters lateral as he had instructed. As the incision deepened, I immediately sensed something wasn't right. The anatomy before me didn't align with our pre-surgical images. My pulse spiked, and a wave of panic surged through me. "I don't recognize this," I whispered urgently, the scalpel frozen in my grasp. Andrew's voice stayed calm, reassuring, yet subtly forceful. "You're doing fine. Daniel, keep going. You'll see familiar landmarks shortly." I pushed aside my anxiety, desperate to trust him. Slowly, I proceeded, every move feeling heavier and more uncertain than the last. Minutes later, as I delicately moved deeper, blood suddenly began pooling rapidly in the surgical site, the bright crimson staining the sterile drapes and making my heart pound furiously. "Something's wrong," I said sharply, trying to control my voice as my fingers trembled. "There's bleeding. This isn't what we planned." Andrew stepped closer, his eyes narrowing sharply, his voice lowered yet clearly authoritative. "Just stay calm. Clamp off the area quickly and keep going. This can be controlled." I followed his directions immediately, struggling to clamp the bleeding vessel. But instead of subsiding, the bleeding intensified dramatically, spiraling out of control as alarms from monitors began ringing urgently around us. Nurses and technicians moved frantically, tension filling the room. "We need to stabilize now," Andrew finally shouted, a sudden urgency in his voice. But beneath the chaos, I saw a fleeting, chilling expression in his eyes. Not panic, not concern, but cold detachment, as if he'd already anticipated this outcome. Fear and confusion washed over me. How had everything gone so terribly wrong? And why had Andrew guided me into a situation clearly fraught with danger? The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me dizzy and numb even as I struggled desperately to regain control of the rapidly deteriorating situation. Within moments, the operating room descended into chaos. Blood poured rapidly, pooling around my hands, staining gloves, and soaking through surgical drapes with alarming speed. My heart pounded violently against my ribcage as monitors screamed frantic alarms, their shrill warnings echoing relentlessly through the room. Blood pressure dropping rapidly, a nurse shouted urgently, voice tight with panic. "I can't stop the bleeding," I said desperately, hands trembling uncontrollably. Andrew stepped in swiftly, his movements precise, yet somehow too delayed, as if he'd intentionally waited for the exact moment control became impossible. "Move aside," Andrew commanded sharply, his voice suddenly authoritative, yet oddly calm. He took over swiftly, working quickly to clamp and suture. But the damage had spiraled beyond recovery. Every effort was too little. Too late. Within minutes, the patient's vitals flatlined, the monitor displaying that stark, unchanging line accompanied by a deafening monotone beep. Time of death. 10:46. A.M. Andrew said coldly, his eyes unreadable. Silence crashed heavily over the room, broken only by the subdued whispers and stunned breaths of the medical team around us. Andrew slowly removed his gloves, his gaze lifting deliberately to meet mine with chilling detachment. "What happened?" "Daniel," he asked loudly, turning heads sharply in my direction. "You knew precisely what you were supposed to do. Why did you deviate from our plan?" My mouth fell open in shock, words catching painfully in my throat. I did exactly as you instructed," I stammered, desperation clawing at my voice. Andrew shook his head solemnly, his expression a perfect mask of disappointment. "I warned you repeatedly. Daniel, surgery requires precision, not improvisation. This loss is entirely your responsibility." The room spun violently around me, nausea and dread rising sharply, overwhelming me as I felt every accusing stare bore deeply into my soul. My entire life, career, and everything I had sacrificed was collapsing right before my eyes. The hospital's conference room felt colder and more suffocating than usual, each breath heavy with tension and suspicion. Around the polished oak table, department heads and senior surgeons sat with stern faces, their silence deepening my anxiety. Opposite me, Andrew sat calmly, his expression carefully neutral as he neatly arranged a stack of files in front of him. Dr. Sir Mitchell, the hospital's chief of surgery, finally broke the oppressive silence. His voice carried a weight of authority, yet it was laced with evident disappointment. "Daniel, please explain exactly what happened during today's surgery." I drew a shaky breath, fighting the panic threatening to strangle my words. I followed Andrew's instructions precisely exactly as he instructed me. I insisted, voice tight with desperation. He directed me to deviate 2 centimeters lateral from the original surgical plan. Before I could continue, Andrew raised his hand gently, interjecting with a calm, almost compassionate tone. "Daniel, I understand your distress, but that's simply not true." His gaze swept the table, gaining immediate attention and sympathy. The surgical approach was clearly established beforehand. Daniel unfortunately chose to deviate without consultation. A quiet murmur rippled around the room. Colleagues exchanged hesitant glances, uncertainty visible on their faces. Dr. Mitchell furrowed his brow, clearly troubled. "Andrew, are you saying Daniel acted independently, ignoring your explicit instructions?" Andrew sighed deeply, a masterfully staged gesture of regret. "I'm afraid so. Yes, I've documented everything clearly in the surgical notes." He slid the files gently toward Dr. Mitchell, whose fingers grasped them hesitantly, flipping slowly through meticulously annotated documents. My heart sank sharply as I glimpsed the rewritten notes, every crucial detail subtly altered. The narrative manipulated to erase any trace of Andrew's direct involvement. Andrew had anticipated every move, crafting his deception with surgical precision. "This is falsified." I choked out desperately, my voice trembling, eyes wide with disbelief. "He's rewritten everything." Andrew's eyebrows rose slightly, his voice remaining carefully measured. "Daniel, accusations won't change the facts. I wish you'd reconsider this path." I turned to the senior nurse who'd assisted us during surgery. Seeking any glimmer of support, she avoided my pleading gaze, staring fixedly down at her tightly clasped hands, visibly uncomfortable yet utterly silent. Beside her, the anesthesiologist shifted awkwardly, eyes glued to the table, offering me no solidarity. "Please," I begged, my voice cracking as I searched the faces around the table. "You were all there. You must have heard him instruct me." But my desperate appeals only deepened the uncomfortable silence. Each face, formerly friendly, now reflected skepticism and doubt. They'd already chosen whom to believe. My protests seemed only to strengthen their suspicion, isolating me further in this unbearable trap. Dr. Mitchell finally sighed deeply, setting the fabricated documents down firmly. His gaze, once warm and supportive, was now cold and accusatory. "Daniel, surgical precision and accountability are non-negotiable standards here. Andrew has presented clear evidence your explanations lack substantiation." I felt dizzy, my vision swimming as Andrew leaned back slowly, a carefully rehearsed look of sorrow masking his triumph. His calm control contrasted sharply with my mounting panic. Around the table, colleagues nodded silently, visibly aligning themselves with Andrew's authoritative presence. A crushing wave of despair hit me sharp, unbearable, and utterly devastating. The realization was suffocating. Andrew had meticulously orchestrated this betrayal, leveraging falsified documents and calculated narratives to destroy my credibility. Every colleague I'd respected, trusted, and admired was now silently complicit, willingly or unwillingly. In my downfall, I slumped back, numb and defeated. All the years of relentless dedication, sacrifice, and hard work were rapidly dissolving into meaningless dust. I was utterly alone, trapped helplessly in Andrew's perfectly designed deception, my future unraveling swiftly before my eyes. In the days following the disastrous hearing, the hospital corridors I had once navigated confidently now felt hostile and alien. Friends who once smiled warmly in passing now averted their gazes, abruptly changing direction whenever they saw me approaching. Conversations would halt abruptly as soon as I entered a room, replaced by awkward, tense silences. One afternoon, I approached James, the colleague who had offered encouragement before the surgery, hoping desperately for some small reassurance. But when he saw me coming, he tensed visibly, eyes darting anxiously around the hallway as if searching for an escape. "James, please," I said softly, reaching out in desperation. "You know me. You have to believe me." He shook his head uneasily, refusing to meet my eyes. "Daniel, it's complicated. Andrew has everyone convinced. I can't afford to take sides. I'm sorry." His hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor as he fled, leaving me utterly isolated, my heart sinking painfully with every step he took away from me. Each day at the hospital became a torturous routine of isolation. The nurses avoided my presence altogether, their previously friendly nods replaced by wary glances and whispers behind cupped hands. Even the junior residents, who once eagerly sought my guidance, now regarded me with suspicion and distant politeness, clearly uncomfortable speaking with me beyond professional necessity. I began eating lunch alone in my office, unable to bear the accusing, judgmental silence in the cafeteria. The food felt tasteless. My appetite long vanished. Sleep eluded me at night, replaced by relentless anxiety and self-doubt. Questions haunted me endlessly. Had I missed obvious warning signs? Had I been too trusting, too naive? The emotional isolation cut deeper than any surgical blade ever could. I repeatedly revisited the events in my mind, desperately searching for the precise moment when everything had gone irreversibly wrong. My heart twisted painfully each time I recalled Andrew's carefully controlled face as he falsely accused me. One evening, I lingered by the operating room's observation window, watching silently as Andrew confidently led another surgical team through a complex procedure, their expressions full of admiration and respect. The painful reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. My life, career, and identity had been methodically dismantled. Andrew had effortlessly replaced me, erasing years of dedication and sacrifice with just a few carefully manipulated words. Standing there, utterly alone and deeply shattered, I felt the last fragile threads of hope slipping away. Despair settled in my chest, heavy and suffocating. As I finally understood the terrible truth, I was now completely isolated, with nowhere left to turn. Late one evening, as I sat alone in the hospital's deserted lounge, my gaze blankly fixed on the flickering vending machine lights, I heard quiet footsteps approach. Instinctively, I tensed, expecting yet another cold encounter or awkward avoidance. Instead, I heard a familiar, gentle voice. "Daniel, surprised." I looked up sharply, recognizing Alice Harper, a young surgeon known for her exceptional talent and equally notable clashes with Andrew Caldwell. We'd never been particularly close, but she'd always been quietly independent, someone who seemed unaffected by hospital politics. "Alice?" I said cautiously, uncertain why she'd seek me out. "What brings you here?" She glanced quickly down the hall, ensuring we were alone, then sat across from me, her expression sincere but guarded. "I saw what Andrew did to you," she began softly, her eyes reflecting genuine empathy. "He tried something similar with me last year, tried to push me out when he saw me as competition." My heart quickened with shock and relief simultaneously. Could someone finally see the truth? Still wary, I hesitated, searching her face carefully. "Why would you believe me when everyone else doesn't?" "Because I know Andrew," she said firmly, her voice edged with restrained bitterness. "He's meticulous, manipulative, and ruthless. I've seen firsthand what he's capable of." I exhaled slowly, emotion tightening my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt a faint spark of hope stir within me. "Do you really think you can help?" Alice leaned in, determination flashing clearly in her eyes. "We can gather evidence, find others he's sabotaged, prove his pattern. It won't be easy, but I'm willing if you are." Looking into her earnest face, I finally nodded, daring to trust again. For the first time since the nightmare began, I wasn't alone, and that tiny, fragile realization ignited a small but fierce flame of hope inside me. Over the next few weeks, Alice and I began our careful, secretive investigation. Each step felt perilous, every conversation laced with caution and unspoken anxiety. We knew the risk we faced: one wrong move, and Andrew would destroy us both permanently. Our first move was contacting Emma Reynolds, the gifted resident whom Andrew had abruptly transferred away. Initially, she was hesitant, frightened of retribution, but after gentle reassurance from Alice, she reluctantly shared her own painful story. Emma revealed how Andrew had subtly undermined her reputation, distorted records, and manipulated senior staff against her, leaving her powerless to defend herself. "Andrew controls everything," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. No one dared challenge his version of events. Her confession gave us renewed determination. Encouraged, we carefully reached out to Brian, the resident I'd witnessed Andrew berating. When we found him, Brian seemed haunted, his eyes wary and tired. After cautiously confirming our sincerity, he admitted Andrew had forced him into silence with threats about his career. "I can't help openly," Brian warned nervously, "but I'll give you access to my files. You'll see everything you need, just don't mention my name." The documents Brian provided revealed chilling patterns. Surgical plans quietly altered, mistakes carefully staged, and young doctors systematically targeted whenever their talent became too threatening. Each revelation made me sick with rage and grief. Andrew's calculated cruelty was more extensive and ruthless than I'd ever imagined. Late one evening, Alice and I sat quietly in my apartment, papers spread across the table, exhausted yet resolute. She highlighted another file with careful determination. "If we can verify this alteration, we'll have undeniable proof," she murmured. Eyes intense, I stared at the evidence, feeling a surge of hope mixed with dread. This could work. I breathed cautiously, afraid even to believe it. Alice placed a steadying hand on my arm, determination clear in her voice. "It has to. We're fighting not just for ourselves, Daniel, but for everyone he's silenced. We can't let him continue." Looking into her resolute eyes, I felt a new, stronger sense of purpose. Together, we'd uncovered Andrew's dark secrets now. We needed to expose them. It would be risky, possibly career-ending, but the truth was finally within reach. And for the first time in weeks, the hope I felt was fierce and unwavering. Late one evening, Alice and I had just finished reviewing documents in a secluded corner of the hospital library. As we cautiously exited into the dim corridor, we froze, standing calmly in the shadows, hands clasped behind his back. Was Andrew Caldwell. He stood perfectly still, his eyes narrowing subtly as if he'd anticipated our arrival. "Working late again." "I see," Andrew said smoothly, stepping slowly forward into the pale fluorescent light. His voice was calm, but there was a chilling edge beneath the surface. My throat tightened instantly. Beside me, Alice stiffened, her breath quickening slightly. "Just catching up on paperwork," she answered, her tone carefully neutral. Andrew nodded slowly, his lips curving into a faint, unsettling smile. Casually, deliberately, he adjusted the cuff of his shirt sleeve, smoothing out an imaginary wrinkle, a small gesture that radiated quiet menace. "Paperwork, of course," he echoed softly, eyes locked onto mine. "I've noticed how thorough you both have become lately, almost as if you're looking for something very particular." I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse quicken painfully. He knew perhaps not everything, but enough. Alice shifted uncomfortably, glancing quickly toward me, fear flashing briefly in her eyes before she steadied herself. "What exactly are you implying, Andrew?" I asked carefully, struggling to hide my nervousness. Andrew tilted his head slightly, his gaze sharpening, his voice dripping with subtle threat. "I'm simply concerned, Daniel. Curiosity can be dangerous. I've seen too many promising careers cut short because of misguided loyalty and misplaced curiosity." He paused deliberately, his eyes shifting pointedly toward Alice. "Speaking of misplaced loyalty, I heard you had an interesting chat with Emma recently. Such a shame she couldn't handle the pressures of this place. I'd hate to see history repeat itself." Alice's breath caught audibly, her body tensing beside me. Andrew had carefully chosen his words just enough to confirm he knew our moves, yet subtle enough to remain ambiguous. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, panic and anger surging sharply. "You can't intimidate us, Andrew," Alice finally responded, her voice firm but quivering slightly with suppressed fear. "We haven't done anything wrong." Andrew's expression turned cold, his mask of calm slipping momentarily. He leaned closer, his voice lowered into a harsh whisper. Be very careful. Alice, you survived once barely. I doubt your career could withstand another unfortunate misunderstanding. And Daniel, he turned his chilling gaze directly toward me. It would be tragic if you lost more than you already have. Every muscle in my body tightened, fighting the urge to respond aggressively. Fear, anger, and frustration twisted violently within me. Andrew was making it abundantly clear he not only knew we were investigating him, but he also intended to crush us swiftly if we continued. Slowly, Andrew straightened, smoothing the lapels of his coat with exaggerated calmness. I suggest you both get some rest, he said, voice returning to his usual controlled tone. Exhaustion often leads to mistakes. And as we've seen, mistakes here can be devastating. He turned away leisurely, footsteps echoing softly down the corridor, leaving us in stunned silence. Only after he disappeared around the corner did Alice exhale sharply. Visibly shaken, she leaned against the wall, her composure crumbling slightly. He knows, she whispered urgently, fear flickering openly in her eyes. He's already watching us. I nodded grimly, adrenaline flooding my veins. Andrew had deliberately threatened us with chilling precision, and we had underestimated just how closely he was monitoring our actions. Now the stakes were brutally clear. We can't afford any more delays, I whispered, voice trembling slightly with newfound determination. We need to move faster and finish this before he destroys us completely. Alice drew a steadying breath. Turning to face me squarely, she reached out firmly, gripping my wrist in silent solidarity. We're in this together. Daniel, if he thinks threats will stop us, he's wrong. Looking into her fiercely determined eyes, I felt my resolve strengthen. Andrew's intimidation had backfired instead of crippling us with fear. He had forged our courage into steel. There was no turning back. The fight ahead was daunting and perilous, but for the first time, I felt prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Knowing Alice stood firmly by my side, the night before confronting the hospital's leadership, Alice and I met discreetly in my apartment, laying out our carefully gathered evidence across the coffee table. Each document represented weeks of risk and quiet desperation. Each page carried the weight of our careers, our reputations, our futures. This is everything, Alice murmured, carefully organizing the files. Her voice trembled slightly despite her determined expression. Once we do this, there's no turning back. I nodded, anxiety tightening painfully in my chest. I know, but it's our only chance. We have to expose him now or never. Alice took a shaky breath, visibly steeling herself. Let's run through it again, step by step. We can't afford mistakes. As we rehearsed our presentation, a sudden noise startled us, a soft thud near the apartment door. Instantly alert, I exchanged a nervous glance with Alice. I moved cautiously toward the door, pulse racing, only to find a plain envelope slipped underneath. Hands trembling, I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a short, chilling note. Typed anonymously, I'd reconsider your next move carefully. Accidents happen so easily. My heart stopped, dread washing over me as I handed the note to Alice. Her face paled as she read, the color draining rapidly from her cheeks. He knows our exact plan, she whispered, panic flashing briefly across her face. We're compromised. Fear surged within me, sharp and suffocating. Andrew's reach extended even further than we'd imagined, and the threat was devastatingly real. I felt an overwhelming urge to abandon our mission, to hide and protect what little remained of our lives. But then, looking into Alice's determined yet fearful eyes, I realized retreating was exactly what Andrew expected. No, I finally said firmly, forcing strength into my voice despite the fear gripping my heart. He's trying to intimidate us. If we back down now, he'll win forever. Alice hesitated, then slowly straightened, resolve returning steadily to her eyes. You're right. If we let him scare us off, we lose everything anyway. We stood together, silence stretching between us, each of us fully understanding the terrible risks ahead. Tomorrow's confrontation was our one and only chance, the highest possible stakes with no room for error. It's all or nothing now, I said quietly, holding her gaze steadily. Are you sure you're ready? Alice nodded, her voice steadying into fierce determination. We've come too far to stop now. Whatever happens, we face it together. In that moment, fear was tempered by an ironclad resolve. The battle ahead was terrifying, uncertain, potentially disastrous, but retreat was no longer an option. Tomorrow, we would stake everything on the truth, fully aware that failure meant losing far more than our careers. The hospital's executive conference room was stifling, every breath heavy with anticipation. Alice and I entered slowly, feeling the weight of our careers and lives pressing painfully upon our shoulders. Around the polished mahogany table sat the senior administrators, their faces solemn, guarded, awaiting answers that could alter the hospital's future. Directly opposite, Andrew Caldwell watched us intently, his composure unnerving. Dr. Mitchell broke the uneasy silence. His authoritative voice resonated clearly. Daniel. Alice, you requested this urgent meeting. You claim to have serious accusations against Dr. Caldwell. Proceed carefully and present your evidence. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I stood, feeling every eye burning into me. We have evidence demonstrating that Dr. Caldwell has systematically manipulated patient records, sabotaged colleagues, and concealed deliberate medical errors. I began, my voice steady despite internal turmoil. Immediately, murmurs swept through the room, expressions shifting between shock, disbelief, and intrigue. Andrew's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, his posture tightening almost invisibly. Alice spread out the meticulously gathered documents, her voice clear but trembling slightly. We've documented multiple cases, including Daniel's surgical incident, the deliberate sidelining of Emma Reynolds, and sabotaging Brian Carter's surgical records. Everything points consistently to Dr. Caldwell. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, skepticism and concern battling openly on his face. This is an extraordinary claim. Do you have concrete proof beyond your words? Yes, we do, Alice responded firmly, placing forward Brian's detailed files and Emma's altered surgical notes. Check the timestamps, signatures, and alterations carefully. Everything aligns perfectly with Dr. Caldwell's administrative control periods. Andrew raised a single hand, calmly interjecting, "May I?" Without waiting, he smoothly produced a folder of his own, sliding it toward Dr. Mitchell. This should clear up any confusion. I suspected Daniel and Alice might bring misleading accusations today. Here is clear documentation proving their supposed evidence is fabricated. It's tragic they've resorted to such desperate measures. My heart pounded furiously as Dr. and Mitchell flipped slowly through Andrew's carefully prepared documents. The confusion on his face deepened. Several administrators exchanged uneasy glances, uncertainty thickening the tension. Desperation surged within me, and anger threatened to burst from my throat. That's not true, I protested sharply, struggling to maintain composure. He's manipulating you just like he manipulated those files. Andrew regarded me calmly, his voice dripping with cool confidence. Daniel, your emotional instability is exactly why this unfortunate situation arose. These wild accusations are a sad attempt to deflect blame. A ripple of doubt visibly moved across several administrators' faces. Panic flashed through Alice's eyes, but her voice remained resolute. Please, speak directly with staff members privately away from Dr. Caldwell's influence. They'll confirm the truth if they feel safe enough to speak honestly. For a tense moment, silence stretched heavily, broken abruptly by Dr. Sarah Thompson, a highly respected senior surgeon known for her fairness. She leaned forward sharply, eyes piercing Andrew directly. Andrew, can you explain clearly why all these supposed fabrications perfectly match timelines when you had full authority over records? Andrew's jaw tightened fractionally, clearly unprepared for her direct challenge. Coincidence. Sarah, these timelines could easily be manipulated. Yet, Dr. Thompson pressed calmly but firmly. Multiple respected staff are consistently involved in your so-called coincidences. Isn't that highly improbable? Andrew hesitated briefly, a rare flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. The administrator's murmurs grew louder, voices now openly expressing confusion and concern. My pulse raced anxiously, hope stirring faintly again. Alice squeezed my wrist subtly beneath the table, offering silent reassurance as the room grew increasingly restless. Finally, Dr. Mitchell raised a hand sharply, restoring uneasy silence. He glanced carefully between us, visibly torn between trust, skepticism, and concern. These are grave allegations, he declared slowly. and the evidence warrants thorough investigation. Nothing can be decided hastily. Andrew's expression darkened almost imperceptibly, frustration now evident beneath his carefully constructed facade. This investigation is unnecessary, he stated evenly, struggling slightly to retain control. I assure you, Doctor, Mitchell firmly interrupted. The integrity of this hospital demands transparency. We owe a careful examination to everyone involved. Until this investigation concludes, both sides must cease any further interference. I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me alongside new anxiety. Andrew's gaze locked onto mine, the unspoken fury in his eyes promising retribution. Alice and I had risked everything, but for the first time, cracks appeared in Andrew's carefully maintained dominance. As the meeting adjourned with tense uncertainty, Alice gently touched my arm, whispering quietly, "We did it. It's begun." "Yes," I murmured softly, heart racing. But now the hardest part begins. We had stepped irreversibly into dangerous waters, fully aware the battle was far from over. But finally, the truth had begun to surface, fragile and tentative yet real enough to give us hope. In the days following our confrontation with hospital leadership, Andrew's carefully constructed control began to unravel, revealing a more dangerous and desperate man beneath. The calm facade he had long maintained now vanished, replaced by palpable anger and an unmistakable determination to silence us by any means necessary. One evening, Alice and I remained late at the hospital, meticulously securing the final set of documents. Suddenly, the office phone rang sharply, slicing through the tense silence. Hesitantly, I lifted the receiver, a chill running down my spine as Andrew's unmistakable voice echoed clearly through the line. "Daniel," he said coldly, his tone laced with barely restrained fury. "I warned you about pushing this too far. You're leaving me no choice." "What do you mean?" I demanded, struggling to steady my shaking voice. "You'll find out soon enough," he replied softly, his voice chillingly calm. The line went abruptly silent, leaving me staring at Alice, dread tightening my chest. Moments later, an urgent knock rattled the door. I opened it to find Brian, his face pale, breath ragged. "Someone just broke into your office, Daniel," he gasped. I saw Andrew near there earlier. Fear surged violently within me. Without hesitation, Alice and I hurried to my office, dread filling every step. The door hung ajar, papers scattered chaotically, files torn and shredded. Our carefully documented evidence, our strongest hope, lay damaged, nearly destroyed. My heart sank sharply, despair threatening to consume me. "He's destroying everything," Alice whispered, panic tightening her throat, but her resolve quickly replaced fear. "We can't let him win." Before we could act, footsteps approached rapidly. Andrew appeared in the doorway, his presence dominating and threatening. His gaze was icy, his voice low and menacing. "You both had countless opportunities to back away gracefully. Now, you've forced me into measures I hope to avoid. Threats won't silence us." "Andrew," Alice challenged bravely, stepping forward protectively. Andrew smiled chillingly, eyes filled with dangerous intent. Perhaps not threats, but actions might. He reached slowly into his coat, withdrawing a small USB drive, holding it up mockingly. "This contains enough fabricated evidence to permanently end your careers, and perhaps even your freedom. The hospital board trusts me implicitly. They'll believe whatever I provide." Desperation and anger surged within me, my voice trembling but fierce. "You can't keep manipulating reality forever. Eventually, they'll see through you." Andrew's expression darkened dangerously, stepping closer, voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "By the time they do, it'll be far too late for you both." As he turned sharply and disappeared down the corridor, Alice and I stood frozen, realizing the peril we faced. The stakes had now escalated dramatically. Our struggle for justice had become a raw fight for survival, and we knew clearly that our next step had to be bold, decisive, and immediate. Alice and I rushed through the quiet corridors, evidence clutched tightly, knowing each second counted. As we burst into the executive conference room unannounced, the startled faces of the hospital's senior leaders turned sharply toward us, shock and confusion written plainly across their expressions. Dr. Mitchell stood abruptly, his voice edged with irritation and surprise. What's the meaning of this interruption? Please listen. I gasped, urgently placing our documents onto the table. We have absolute proof Andrew is attempting to destroy the evidence and sabotage our investigation. He's desperate. At that exact moment, Andrew appeared behind us, breathing heavily, fury radiating visibly from his entire presence. This has gone far enough, he hissed, stepping toward us aggressively. These lies must stop now. Alice immediately interjected, her voice strong despite visible fear. Andrew just threatened us. He broke into Daniel's office, trying to destroy all remaining evidence against him. Andrew scoffed coldly, forcing a dismissive laugh. Absurd claims. Nothing more than desperate paranoia. Surely you see how irrational these accusations have become, Doctor. Mitchell exchanged uneasy glances with his colleagues, clearly uncertain and uncomfortable. But before doubt could fully settle, Alice produced the security footage Brian had quickly provided. This surveillance clearly shows Andrew entering Daniel's office exactly when the documents were destroyed. Andrew's composure faltered, panic briefly flashing through his eyes before he recovered his icy facade. He struggled for words, finally snapping. That footage proves nothing. It could easily be manipulated. Then call security immediately. I challenged him fiercely, my voice trembling with anger and urgency. Verify the footage yourself. Tension gripped the room as several administrators shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Mitchell, clearly conflicted, finally spoke with reluctant authority, his voice firm. We must investigate this carefully. We owe it to the hospital and everyone involved to know the truth. Andrew's anger erupted openly. His calm demeanor shattered completely. How dare you, he snarled, his voice dangerously low, eyes blazing. After everything I've done, you trust these accusations over me, Doctor? Sarah Thompson, known for her careful neutrality, spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the tension. Andrew, enough. Your actions and reactions today raise serious doubts. We've trusted you implicitly, perhaps mistakenly. Andrew turned sharply, facing me directly, his voice filled with chilling bitterness. You think you've won? If I go down, I'll make sure you both suffer even more deeply than you already have. Remember, you destroyed yourselves trying to destroy me. His words sent chills down my spine, leaving the room momentarily stunned into silence. Then, with barely restrained rage, Andrew stormed out, slamming the door violently behind him. A long, tense silence followed. Slowly, Dr. Meta Mitchell turned toward us, his expression pained and filled with profound regret. It appears we've misjudged the situation terribly. Daniel, Alice, we owe you both more than an apology. We'll begin a full, impartial investigation immediately. Relief surged briefly through me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a profound sadness. I glanced toward Alice, seeing tears quietly tracing down her cheeks. Our victory felt hollow, tainted deeply by Andrew's final threat and the irreversible damage to our lives and careers. Dr. Thompson approached gently, her eyes compassionate but honest. You've done something brave and necessary, but the damage already done here will take years to repair, if it ever can be fully undone. As Alice and I left the conference room, physically and emotionally exhausted, I felt the immense weight of what we'd lost settle deeply within my chest. Andrew's manipulation had shattered more than our reputations. It had shaken our faith in the institution we'd dedicated our lives to. Walking through the quiet halls, Alice whispered softly, voice filled with pain, "Do you think it was worth it?" I stopped, struggling against a wave of sorrow and bitterness. I honestly don't know, I admitted quietly, my voice heavy. We exposed the truth, but look what it cost us. I don't think we'll ever truly recover. She took my hand gently, gripping it tightly, a small gesture that spoke volumes about solidarity and shared suffering. Maybe not, she murmured, eyes glistening sadly. But at least we fought back. At least he can't hurt anyone else. I nodded slowly, accepting the bittersweet truth. Our careers lay in ruin, our reputations permanently scarred. Justice had come at an immense price. But perhaps, despite everything lost, our sacrifice ensured that Andrew's reign of manipulation and deceit had finally come to an end. Yet even as I embraced that fragile comfort, Andrew's final words echoed hauntingly within me, a bitter reminder of the profound cost we'd paid. You destroyed yourselves trying to destroy me. In the months following the explosive revelation of Andrew's misconduct, the truth had spread rapidly through the hospital, carrying with it a shadow neither Alice nor I could escape. Justice had been served, yet its victory felt hollow and bitterly incomplete. The damage to our careers and reputations had been swift and devastating. Returning to normal life was nearly impossible. Colleagues who once respected me now offered uneasy greetings or avoided me entirely. Uncertain how to reconcile the scandal with the truth, nurses and junior doctors whispered quietly as I passed, their eyes filled with lingering doubt and discomfort. One afternoon, as I prepared to see a new patient, I overheard his family speaking softly outside the room. "Are you sure we want Dr. Daniel?" a hesitant voice questioned nervously. After all those stories, I felt sick with shame, knowing my ability and integrity had been irrevocably questioned. No matter how many times the hospital officially cleared our names, suspicion lingered like a toxic cloud. Alice faced similar struggles. Despite her undeniable courage, the whispers followed her relentlessly. Her promising career trajectory slowed dramatically, opportunities for advancement quietly withdrawn. Even friends she'd trusted deeply now greeted her cautiously, as if associating with her carried a dangerous stigma. One evening, we sat together quietly at a small cafe far from the hospital. The isolation we both felt palpable. Alice stirred her coffee absently, her gaze distant. "Do you think it'll always feel like this, like we've lost everything?" I sighed heavily. Haunted by the ghosts of what might have been, I think some losses never fully heal. We fought so hard, believing justice would fix everything, but we underestimated the damage it would leave behind. Alice nodded slowly, sadness heavy in her eyes. "I thought exposing Andrew would mean freedom, but it just feels like another kind of imprisonment." She was right. Justice had been achieved, Andrew's power dismantled, but the scars remained deep and permanent. Every day we struggled to rebuild trust and reclaim our professional identities felt like pushing endlessly against an invisible weight. In that quiet cafe, watching the world pass by, I finally accepted a painful truth: our battle had been necessary, yet its consequences were irreversible. The legacy of Andrew's betrayal and our costly victory would follow us indefinitely. A permanent shadow we'd carry silently, a haunting reminder of the price we'd paid to do the right thing. Slowly, over time, Alice and I began the challenging journey toward acceptance. The scars we bore remained deep, permanent reminders of our painful ordeal. Yet gradually, we found the courage to move forward, understanding that healing wasn't about erasing wounds, it was learning to live meaningfully despite them. Alice was the first to step beyond the boundaries of medicine. After months of quiet reflection, she chose to channel her experiences into advocacy, speaking at small conferences about workplace ethics and integrity. At first hesitant, her voice soon grew confident and strong, turning her pain into something deeply empowering. Witnessing Alice find purpose in our shared trauma inspired me profoundly. After long contemplation, I decided to transition toward teaching, guiding future medical students, not only in technical skill, but also in resilience, compassion, and moral courage. Though I initially feared rejection, a small university accepted my application warmly, offering me a chance to rebuild something new from the ruins of my past career. Stepping into my first classroom felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Standing before eager students, their faces bright with curiosity and trust, I realized I was not defined by my loss, but by the values I still had the power to share. Over time, my fear faded, replaced by a quiet, enduring sense of purpose and fulfillment. Alice attended one of my early lectures, sitting discreetly in the back row. Afterward, she approached me with tears shimmering in her eyes and whispered gently, "We found a new way forward, didn't we?" I smiled softly, feeling a genuine sense of peace. We did. Maybe not the path we expected, but still valuable. In that quiet exchange, Alice and I finally understood the deeper truth. The greatest victory wasn't exposing Andrew or reclaiming our lost reputations. It was discovering the strength to rebuild from heartbreak and betrayal, creating meaning from our darkest moments. As time went on, our careers flourished differently, but authentically. No longer shadowed by bitterness or regret, our wounds remained, but they no longer defined us. We had learned a powerful lesson sometimes. Genuine triumph wasn't about reclaiming what had been lost. It was about accepting, healing, and finding the courage to begin again. We had finally achieved a quiet, resilient victory, one that required no applause or validation. Only the courage to step forward despite the scars we carried forever. As time passed, Alice and I gradually settled into lives marked by gentle stability and imperfect peace. Neither of us had reclaimed exactly what we'd lost, but we found something perhaps more valuable, a quiet contentment born from acceptance of our scars, rather than rejection of them. I continued teaching at the university. Finding comfort in the steady rhythm of academia, my students appreciated my lessons not only about medicine, but also about integrity, resilience, and compassion. The hard-won wisdom drawn directly from my past struggles. Each semester, I felt the wounds of betrayal less sharply, gradually transforming from bitter memories into sources of quiet strength. Alice, meanwhile, continued her advocacy work. Her voice grew stronger, her presence more confident, though occasionally shadows from our past experiences resurfaced, sometimes in quiet moments alone, or during an unexpected mention of the hospital. The pain no longer defined her. Instead, those shadows became reminders of her strength and courage. We met regularly, often sharing stories of triumphs and setbacks, laughter and lingering sadness. One evening, seated on a quiet bench overlooking a peaceful park, Alice gazed thoughtfully into the fading daylight, a gentle smile crossing her face. "You know, Daniel," she said softly, her voice calm and reflective. "For so long, I kept thinking we had to fully heal to find happiness again. But maybe real healing isn't about forgetting the pain, it's about carrying it differently." I nodded quietly, recognizing the deep truth in her words. Maybe it's not about perfection or even complete healing. Maybe the real peace comes from accepting our imperfections and embracing life exactly as it is. Alice squeezed my hand gently, her eyes shining softly in the twilight. Exactly. We don't have to erase our past to live meaningful lives. Those experiences shaped us. They taught us about courage, integrity, and empathy. Perhaps our lives now are richer because of everything we endured, not despite it. Sitting beside her, feeling the gentle warmth of the evening sun fade slowly, I finally understood. Life was no longer about achieving some idealized perfection. It was about finding deep fulfillment within our imperfect circumstances. The wounds would always exist, quiet reminders of our journey, but they no longer restricted us. As darkness gently fell, enveloping us in comfortable silence, a profound sense of peace settled within me. I realized clearly, for the first time, that true happiness was not the absence of pain or struggle, but the quiet, enduring courage to embrace and live fully within life's beautiful imperfections. Years later, as I stood quietly by the large auditorium window, awaiting my turn to speak at a graduation ceremony, memories of my past journey gently flooded back. The vivid pain, betrayal, and the haunting isolation once felt unbearable now seemed distant, softened by time and acceptance into quiet reminders of strength rather than bitterness. Alice joined me quietly, standing beside me in comfortable silence. Through years of friendship and mutual healing, we had found peace not because our wounds were forgotten, but because we learned to honor them as essential parts of our journey. Today, invited as special guests to speak about integrity and resilience, our presence here felt like a quiet, meaningful victory. As we stepped onto the stage, gazing out at a sea of hopeful, eager young faces, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Alice spoke first, her voice calm and confident, words resonating deeply as she shared lessons learned from our painful past, lessons of courage, honesty, and above all, the transformative power of acceptance. When it was my turn, I spoke honestly about the meaning of true strength, not perfection or flawless victories, but the willingness to remain true to oneself, even at great personal cost. As I spoke, I noticed tears glistening softly in the eyes of some students, a powerful recognition of shared human vulnerability and resilience. Afterward, standing outside beneath the gently rustling leaves of an old oak tree, Alice and I watched as graduates celebrated joyfully with their families. "It's amazing, isn't it?" she mused quietly, a thoughtful smile on her face. how pain can become something so meaningful over time. I nodded, glancing upward at the tree whose branches had weathered countless storms, yet stood strong and beautiful in its imperfection. Perhaps that's exactly what life asks of us. Not perfection, but resilience. Not flawless victories, but meaningful struggles. As the sun filtered gently through the leaves, bathing everything in soft, golden warmth, I felt a quiet, profound sense of fulfillment. Our journey hadn't been easy, and our scars would never fully disappear. But standing there, in that moment of genuine peace, we both knew clearly that true courage wasn't measured by how perfectly we avoided pain, but rather how bravely we faced it, embraced it, and transformed it into something meaningful. We had found our victory, not the one we initially envisioned, but one far deeper and more enduring: the courage to live authentically, honestly, and fully within the beautiful imperfection of life itself. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.